Hey gang, Chonky here. Today is the part 2 of the intro to Dungeons of Sundaria. In the last video we covered all of Galdrin's Crossing and the character creation, just sort of what you can expect when you first start playing the game. In this video we're going to go over the dungeons a little bit more, as well as some of the stuff in combat, like how dodging works and blocking, and I want to even go over the damage formula with you guys. So, starting out, looking at this, you're going to probably be a little confused as to which dungeon you should do first. I'm going to rank them in order of easiest to most difficult. So the easiest one is going to be the Crypt of Horrors. The second one is going to be the Dark Hollow, followed by the Grasslands, Lair of the Kyranids, or Cyranids, however you pronounce it. After that, you have up here the Icy Depths, and then you have the Dreadforge, and then finishing it up right now is the Festering Bog. And when Ragewind Castle is released, which is hopefully going to be within the next couple months, that's going to be right here, right on this peak. Now, when it comes to doing these dungeons on Nightmare, there's definitely a different requirement when it comes to something like doing the Crypt of Horrors on Nightmare, and then doing something like the Festering Bog. So I wanted to go over my recommendations on what kind of gear you would need. Starting out with the Crypt of Horrors, you just need like a lot of legendary. If it's not all legendary, I'm sure you'll be okay, especially if some of your bigger pieces like the chest or the pants or your helmet have a few stars on them, then you should be pretty good. Same with the Dark Hollow, you'll find a little bit more difficulty, but as long as you have mostly legendary gear, you should be pretty good. Once you get into the Grasslands, I would recommend having at least all legendary and maybe a couple pieces of eternal gear. And then stepping into the lair of the Kyranids, you're definitely going to want a little bit more eternal gear. But then when you get into the next tier of dungeons, like the Icy Depths, that's when the bosses become way more difficult, the damage becomes way more out of control. You're going to need as much eternal as possible. I would say as close to all eternal gear as possible, maybe even upgrade it a little bit. But this goes even a step further when you go to the Dreadforge. Now, doing the Dreadforge on Nightmare, if you're not playing a champion or a rogue, I would very, very, very much recommend getting Samrock's Wicked Grog from the Icy Depths. You get that when you defeat Victor. You can pull one of the levers and release Crick from the cage, and he should sell you Samrock's Wicked Grog, which makes you immune to all crowd control effects for a few seconds. And that item is crucial to surviving the Dreadforge, where so many of the enemies have very hard locking CC all the time, like a lot of stuns, so be careful. Getting into the Festering Bog, you're not going to find as many enemies that are going to stun you, but here you're going to find just out of control damage, especially from the regular mobs like the Husks. They have stackable damage, and once it gets like 5 stacks and above, you're taking several thousand points of damage a second. So in Festering Bog, you don't need Samrock's Wicked Grog as much, but here in the Bog, you're going to need all eternal gear and as upgraded as you can get it. I'm not saying it needs to be maxed out, but I mean, pretty close to it. The Bog is very difficult. Now, when you run these dungeons, most of them are pretty linear, but you're going to find little secrets tucked away. You know, there's a lot of breakable walls in the Crypt of Horrors. There are some bosses that are kind of tucked away. There's also some hidden bosses in the Dark Hollow. There is a secret boss in the Bog. I wouldn't actually, yeah, and there's a secret boss in the Dreadforge, now that I think about it. You know, you have the guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but at the bottom of the staircase, he's hiding, just like in that little pit. Lair of the Kyranids, I don't really know if they technically have like a secret boss. Dark Hollow, same, I don't think they have a secret boss. There are some, like, you know, nooks and crannies tucked away, which there's also the Tower Guardians and the Dark Hollow, which I want to do a video on. That's one of my plans. I think that there's a lot of cool things that people have missed in the Tower Guardians and everything they can offer. And who knows, maybe those items will be of some use in the future. The Icy Depths, the only secret boss I would really say is Yargrim, who is the guy who's trapped in a box right before you fight King Duskborn. You do need to beat Yargrim for one of the quests to level up your auto attack. And as far as Rage Wind, I don't really know much. I know a little bit, but I do know that there's going to be a ton of cool things, and I can't wait to break down Rage Wind Castle when that comes out. So when you're starting out, I wanted to bring attention to the dodge mechanic. So the dodge mechanic in Dungeons of Sandaria does not give you any iframes. You can still be hit while you're doing it. The point of the dodge is to give you quick motion in whichever way you're pressing, which in the first few dungeons doesn't really matter, but then when you get to the icy depths, you're going to need to avoid certain boss moves because there will be one-hit mechanics or very hard-hitting mechanics that you might not survive. So that's when the dodge starts to come into play. Another cool thing about the dodge is that it resets your fall damage. So if you notice, in some of my other videos that I've done, you'll see me doing big drops and then dodging right before I hit the ground. That is because it resets your fall damage, so you will take nothing. So it's really good for speed running, or if you're just trying to like get out of the way of something, jump over a ledge, dodge before you hit the ground, and you will nullify all damage. The next thing I wanted to talk about is blocking. Now, myself, I don't use a lot of blocking. I probably should, but I just don't. But when you're using a shield, if you look in the top right of the item's description, you'll see a block percentage. Not all shields block 100%. Mine blocks 106%. Cool. But blocking can actually be pretty detrimental, especially if you're playing a squishy class like a wizard. You can block stuff. So a good example of blocking is, I'm taking some damage, but the moment I start blocking, you will block everything, magic or physical, as long as it's in the direction of the shield. If you just turn a little bit to the side, it will hit through your shield. And a lot of spellcasters will put like some poison on the ground or like fire on the ground. That will also hit you. You cannot block that. So just keep that in mind, that if you are blocking, it is strictly from the direction of your shield. There's another cool thing you can do, which is parrying. And if you parry at the right time, you will become not invulnerable, but you will nullify some attacks. Now, certain attacks cannot be parried, like a lot of boss moves, like the boss of Crypt of Horrors. He will do like this big jump overhead slam. You can't parry that. Pretty much, you just got to get away from him. And if you can't get away from him, you'll just be stunned for a while. And then, you can pop aggression. If you're a champion, you can break it with a rogue, or you can use Samrock's Wicked Grog with one of the other classes. Now, there's a really good example of parrying. I'm going to link in the description below. One of the other dungeon masters in the Discord started doing some YouTube shorts. Well, not shorts, but they're like shorter videos that shows niche things in Dungeons of Sandaria. I'd highly recommend checking him out. I'm actually going to link a video where he beats Karg from the Crypt of Horrors with his rogue, but he's wearing minimal gear. You can see him doing very little damage, and if he were to get hit 3 or 4 times, he would die. But he parries almost every single Karg attack, and it's a really good example on how to use the parry. So I'm going to put that in the description below. You guys should check it out. Really good video. Now, I did mention earlier that we would go over the damage formula, so I'm going to go ahead and go over that now. So the way the damage formula works is it's weapon damage times power divided by 220. So what you would do is you would take your weapon damage and then multiply that by your overall power, so not the power on the weapon, but you would take the 149 times my melee power, which is 6,913, and then divide that by 220, and that's a rough estimate of how much damage you should be doing. Keep in mind that when you have a weapon that has multiple elements on it, they also get their own damage rolls. So having as many elements on a weapon as you can is going to greatly increase how much damage you do overall, just because they're all separate damage rolls, especially if it's an element that works with your character. So like if you have holy on your weapon and you're a cleric, or if you have fire or void and you're a wizard, or like void or physical with a rogue. Well, physical isn't an element, but I digress. You get what I mean. Now, the damage formula for abilities is pretty similar. The only difference is that it's the base damage of your weapon times the ability. So whatever the ability percentage is, like 210% or 340, 550, that stuff. And then it goes by the attack power coefficient, which is whatever your class power is. And then it goes into like hit magnitude, which is, you know, blocking, but that's also for your regular attack, and then defense. So it's base damage, ability, your power divided by 220, and then it does all the other stuff like defenses. So hopefully that explains a little bit of how the damage formula works. I know it can be kind of confusing, you know, all the numbers jumping around. I did want to talk about some other stats though. I did see some confusion in the Discord about certain things. So when it comes to power, spell attack power, ranged attack power, melee attack power, these are very class specific. So melee attack power will only benefit champions and rogues. Ranged attack power is ranger only, and spell attack power is for clerics and wizards. Now, I've seen some people get confused because they'll use the cleric. It's like, well, if I have ranged attack power, does that work for my smite or my ranged spells because it's ranged? No. The ranged attack power is only for rangers, and it's all for the damage formula. If you want to increase any damage for the cleric, you're going to need spell power. Just run spell power. Same with the wizard, spell power. Ranged attack power is only for rangers, and melee attack power is only for champions and rogues. Now, melee attack power can also work for the cleric because of the Pious set. There's also a new elite set that's coming out in Ragewind that will be an upgraded version of the Pious set where they get a little bit of their spell power converted into melee attack power. And at that point, I would still say focus your spell attack power because that's just going to increase your melee attack power in turn. Another stat I wanted to talk about is the crit chance and the bonus crit chance. I'm going to hop on my rogue real quick because it's best explained with rogues because they benefit from crit a lot more than the other classes. So with crit chance, you have your basic like, oh, I have 32.1% crit. That's how often I'm going to crit. You're also going to see on like jewelry, there's a stat bonus crit chance. And what that is whatever your current critical chance is, it's going to take that percentage of it, add it on top. So if I have a 50% chance to crit, and then I have, let's say, a 50% bonus crit chance, that's going to add an extra 25% to my crit chance. This stat is only, in my opinion, only really good on rogues because they have such a high crit chance. I have 32% with just my gear alone, and then when you look at my abilities, you can get an extra 20% from Killing Spree, which lasts for 30 seconds, so that right there bumps me up to 50% crit chance before my bonus crit chance. And I think all in all, I think right now I only have the 8%. So not a lot for me right now on my rogue, but I have seen other people running high bonus crit chance and it's really good. So just another, hopefully that clears up confusion on that stat. The next stats I wanted to talk about would be penetration, which I know I've talked about the penetration stats in past videos, but I also want to cover it here as well. So at first glance, when you look at it, it looks like I would ignore 37.7% of their armor, when in reality, that's a 37.7% chance to ignore their armor completely and do fat damage. Now this is, like I've said before, it's like a secondary critical hit, and it works in tandem with crits, so you can crit and penetrate at the same time. Now the stats Glancing Blow and Deflection are good defenses against crits. Enemies can crit on you, so it's not too bad to have these stats, although I wouldn't prioritize them. There are other stats I would focus. And if the enemy has Glancing Blow or Deflection, that will also reflect on your crits as well. Now if it's a little confusing to have crits and penetrations and armor resistance, Glancing Blow and Deflection all going at each other, the Dungeon Master Chris, who I referenced earlier, made a really nice table that kind of breaks it down really well. And I'll go ahead and put it here. Shout out to you, Chris. Thank you again so much for that table and showing me that video before that, like the Parry video. Good stuff. Go watch that after this video. And I think that's going to pretty much cover it as far as my advanced tips on Dungeons of Sandaria. There's a lot of niche things about this game, but a lot of things are going to be changing. There's a dev update that's coming soon, and I will probably cover that because there's some interesting changes to item stats. And then hopefully within the next couple months we'll get Ragewind, and I want to do a bunch of stuff on that as well. Now I know it's been a few months since I did the last video, and it's been several months since I did the part 1 of this video, and for that I apologize. But now that my life is hopefully less drama filled, things are hopefully moving in a nice direction, I should have some more time to do a little bit of content creation. But I've been pulling like 50-hour work weeks, along with I have a whole bunch of pets and then personal life, so yeah, it's hard to do all that and stream and make content for YouTube. But I haven't forgot about you guys, and I still love this game even though I've been making less content on it lately. But if you guys have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments below. Join my Discord, ask some questions there. Check me out on stream. I stream a few times a week. It's a little sporadic of a schedule right now. Hopefully it'll get better soon. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. See ya.